I changed my phone number last week, blocked every single family member on social media. You might think that sounds extreme, but let me paint you a picture. 3 days ago, my parents showed up at my old apartment pounding on the door, crying and begging me to talk to them. My neighbors called to tell me about the scene outside. My mom was sobbing, saying she was sorry that she did not mean what she said. But here is the thing about apologies that come too late. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever felt like the outsider in your own family, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe because what I am about to share will definitely make you think about what family really means. And trust me, you will want to hear how this all played out. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I always knew something was off about my place in the family. My parents, Robert and Patricia, seemed like decent people from the outside. Dad worked as an accountant at a local firm. Mom was a nurse at the community hospital. We lived in a nice 2-story house with a white picket fence. But inside those walls, there was an invisible hierarchy that I never quite understood as a child. Madison was born 2 years before me, and from day one, she was the golden child. I do not mean this in a subtle way either. The evidence was everywhere written into the very structure of our home. Madison got the larger bedroom with the bay window overlooking the garden. Mine was the smaller back room that barely got any natural light. When people came over, my parents would give them the full tour, spending 10 minutes in Madison's room, talking about her artwork and trophies. When they passed my room, it was always, "And this is where Eliza sleeps." The pattern became clearer as we got older. Madison was an average student, maybe a B- on her best days, but every report card was met with celebration dinner at her favorite restaurant. When I brought home straight A reports, I got a good job while Mom was already asking Madison about her day. It was not that they ignored my achievements completely, they acknowledged them the way you might acknowledge that the mailman delivered the mail. Expected. Unremarkable. During high school, these differences became impossible to ignore. Madison's 16th birthday was an event. Mom planned for months, rented out the community center, invited her entire class. There were decorations, a DJ, a 3-tier cake. I remember helping set up hanging streamers while listening to Mom stress about whether the decorations matched Madison's dress. When my 16th came around 2 years later, we had dinner at home with a grocery store cake. Just the 4 of us. Madison was not even there. She had plans with friends that Mom did not want her to cancel. The extracurricular activities told the same story. Madison wanted to learn piano, so Dad researched the best teachers in town and bought a beautiful upright piano that dominated our living room. She took lessons for 6 months before losing interest, but the piano stayed a monument to Madison's brief musical phase. When I asked about violin lessons, Dad said we could not afford it. The same Dad who had just bought Madison a $500 dress for homecoming. I threw myself into academics because I thought achievement might be the key to their approval. While Madison was out with friends, I was studying. While she was getting average grades and somehow still being praised for doing her best, I was pulling all-nighters to maintain my perfect GPA. When college acceptance letters started arriving, I thought everything would change. Madison got into the state university with her mediocre grades and average test scores. Mom threw a party, literally. She invited the neighbors, bought a banner, made a special dinner. When my Harvard acceptance letter arrived 2 days later, full scholarship included, Mom glanced at it and said, "Well, that's nice, honey," before going back to planning Madison's going-away party. I spent hours in my room during those final months of high school writing in my journal and trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. What invisible standard was I failing to meet? I watched other families analyzed how they interacted with their children, searched for clues about what made the difference between loved and tolerated. The day I left for college, I was secretly relieved. Distance would give me perspective, I thought. Maybe space would make them miss me, make them realize what they had been taking for granted. I called home every week during freshman year, trying to maintain connection, hoping that my independence might somehow shift their view of me. But those phone calls were exercises in disappointment. Mom would answer, we would exchange pleasantries for maybe 3 minutes, and then she would say, "Let me tell you what Madison is up to," and spend the next 20 minutes detailing every mundane aspect of my sister's life. When I tried to share my own experiences, making Dean's List, joining the debate team, landing an internship, the responses were perfunctory. "That's nice, sweetie. Madison just got a new job at the boutique downtown." College graduation should have been a triumph, but even that was tainted by the familiar pattern of favoritism. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing and had already accepted a position at a prestigious firm in Chicago. Madison had dropped out after 2 years to find herself and was living at home working part-time at a coffee shop. My parents attended my graduation, but they spent most of the ceremony talking about Madison's latest boyfriend and her plans to maybe go back to school someday. During the reception, I overheard Dad telling someone that he was proud of both his daughters, but that Madison had such a free spirit and was still figuring out her path, which was perfectly fine, because not everyone is meant for the corporate world like Eliza. The way he said my name made it sound like a limitation rather than an accomplishment. Moving to Chicago was liberating in ways I had not anticipated. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was and what I could contribute. My colleagues appreciated my work ethic and creativity. I was promoted twice in 3 years, each time feeling more confident in my abilities and worth. It was during this time that I met James at a networking event. He was kind, intelligent, and when I told him stories about my family dynamics, he looked genuinely confused and a little angry on my behalf. "That's not normal," he said after I described a typical family dinner conversation. "Parents should not have favorites that obvious." James became my anchor to a different way of being in the world. His family welcomed me, warmly asked about my work, remembered details from previous conversations. His mother sent me care packages and birthday cards. His father asked for my opinion on everything from politics to restaurant recommendations. Being around them showed me what family could look like when it was based on genuine affection rather than arbitrary favoritism. When James proposed, I thought maybe this would be the moment my parents finally saw me as an adult worthy of celebration. I called home excited, ready to share our news and maybe include them in wedding planning. Mom's response was lukewarm congratulations, followed immediately by, "Madison is thinking about getting engaged too. She's been with Trevor for almost a year now." Trevor was Madison's 3rd serious boyfriend since high school. Each relationship had been the most important thing, according to my parents, worthy of family dinners and holiday invitations, while James had been introduced to them exactly once in the 2 years we had been together. Planning the wedding became another exercise in managing expectations. I had saved money for the dress I wanted, the venue that meant something to us, the photographer whose work we loved. When I asked my parents if they wanted to contribute or be involved in planning, Mom's first comment was, "Well, when Madison gets married, we will want to do something really special. Not, we would love to help with your wedding, or what do you need from us?" Just the immediate comparison and the implication that my wedding was somehow less deserving of effort and investment. Dad offered $500 toward the wedding costs, which I initially thought was generous, until I found out 2 weeks later that they had bought Madison a new car for her birthday. $15,000 for a Honda Civic because she needed reliable transportation for her new job at yet another retail store. The wedding day itself was beautiful despite my family's lackluster participation. James's family stepped up in ways that both touched and embarrassed me. His mother helped with last-minute details. His sister gave a heartfelt speech. His father walked me down the aisle when my own dad seemed distracted and uncomfortable in his tuxedo. My parents arrived late, sat in the back, despite reserved front-row seats, and left immediately after dinner without staying for dancing or cake cutting. They did not give a speech. They did not take photos with us. They did not ask about our honeymoon plans. It was like they were obligated guests rather than the bride's parents. The contrast was stark and painful. I watched James's family celebrate us with genuine joy, while my own parents seemed to be counting minutes until they could leave. That night, lying in our hotel room, I cried not from happiness, but from the final understanding that this was never going to change. The early years of marriage brought their own challenges, but they also brought clarity about my family's true priorities. 6 months after our wedding, Madison went through a dramatic breakup with Trevor. Suddenly, my parents were available for emergency phone calls, weekend visits to comfort her, and endless discussions about her healing process. When I called to share that James had been promoted and we were buying our first house, Mom listened for about 30 seconds before launching into Madison's latest crisis. "She really needs our support right now," Mom said. "This breakup has been so hard on her." Madison, meanwhile, had moved back into her childhood bedroom and was being pampered like a heartbroken teenager despite being 26 years old. Mom took vacation days to spend time with her. Dad bought her a gym membership and a spa day to help her feel better about herself. They treated her emotional recovery like a family project, while my actual life milestones went largely unnoticed. The pregnancy that ended in miscarriage was perhaps the most revealing moment of all. James and I had been trying for a year, and when we finally got pregnant, we were cautious but excited. We told my parents at 12 weeks, thinking we had passed the danger zone. Mom's response was, "Well, that's exciting," in the same tone she might use to comment on the weather. No follow-up questions about how I was feeling, what our plans were, whether we needed anything. Just acknowledgement and an immediate subject change to Madison's new job at a local salon. When I miscarried at 14 weeks, I called Mom from the hospital crying and devastated. Her response was, "These things happen, honey. You can try again." No offer to visit, no emotional support, no recognition that James and I had just lost something precious to us. 2 weeks later, Madison got a new boyfriend, and suddenly my parents were hosting dinner parties and talking about how wonderful it was that she was putting herself out there again. The comparison was not lost on me. Madison's new relationship warranted celebration dinners, while my pregnancy loss warranted a brief phone call and advice to try again. James started suggesting that maybe I should limit contact with my family. "They're toxic," he said one night after I hung up from another disappointing conversation with Mom. "This is not how people who love you behave." But I was not ready to give up. Some part of me still believed that if I could just find the right words, the right approach, the right achievement, I could unlock the love I had been seeking my entire life. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving of my 30th year. I had been promoted to senior marketing manager, James, and I had bought a beautiful house in a great neighborhood, and we were planning to start trying for children again. Life was good, and I thought maybe this holiday could be different. James and I drove 6 hours to Ohio, bringing expensive wine and flowers for Mom, a nice bottle of whiskey for Dad, and homemade desserts that I had spent 2 days preparing. I was determined to make an effort to show them that I valued family time and wanted to be closer. Madison was there with her newest boyfriend, Derek, a guy she had been dating for 3 months who was between jobs and had some concerning stories about his past relationships. But from the moment we walked through the door, it was clear who the favored guests were. Mom hugged Madison like she had not seen her in years, even though Madison lived 20 minutes away and visited weekly. She hugged me like she was greeting a neighbor she saw occasionally. Dad immediately started asking Derek about his interests and opinions, engaging him in conversation while barely acknowledging James, despite the fact that James and I had been married for 3 years. Dinner was an exercise in selective attention. Every comment Madison made was met with interest and follow-up questions. When she talked about her job cutting hair at the salon, Mom and Dad acted like she was describing groundbreaking scientific research. When I mentioned my recent promotion and the team I was now managing, Dad said, "That's nice," and immediately turned back to Derek to ask about his thoughts on football. The conversation continued this way throughout the meal. Madison and Derek were the entertainment their opinions sought and valued. James and I were background characters politely included, but never centered. When I tried to share news about our house renovations, Mom interrupted to ask Madison about her apartment lease. It was not just the lack of interest that stung. It was the active choice to prioritize Madison's every word while treating mine like interruptions to the important conversation. 3 decades of this dynamic had worn me down, but somehow I still was not prepared for what came next. After dinner, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I could hear my parents talking with Madison in the living room. They were discussing her future plans, and I heard Mom mention something about money. Curious, I moved closer to the doorway and listened. "We have been saving for this," Dad was saying. "50,000 should be enough for a nice down payment on a house." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. 2 years earlier, when James and I were house hunting, I had asked my parents if they might consider helping with a down payment, even as a loan that we would pay back with interest. Dad had said they did not have that kind of money available, that they were worried about retirement and could not take on any financial risks. But here they were, casually offering Madison $50,000 for a house she had never even mentioned wanting. I walked into the living room, probably looking as shocked as I felt. What did I just hear about $50,000? Mom looked uncomfortable, but not apologetic. "We have been setting aside money for Madison's future," she said. "But when James and I asked about help with our house, you said you did not have money available." Dad shrugged. "Madison's situation is different. She needs more help getting started. You have James's income too." "But you have been planning this for Madison specifically, haven't you? This is not about financial need." The silence that followed felt like confirmation of everything I had suspected, but never wanted to believe. Why does our family always work this way? I asked, my voice getting louder despite my attempts to stay calm. Why is Madison always the priority? What did I do wrong that made you decide I matter less? Mom and Dad exchanged a look, and then Mom said something that will be burned into my memory forever. "Eliza, you are not the favorite, deal with it. Madison has always been special, different from you since the day she was born. Stop being jealous and just accept that this is how it is." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not just the content, but the casual cruelty of it. The way Mom delivered it like she was stating an obvious fact that I should have figured out years ago. Dad nodded in agreement, and Madison actually smiled a little, like she was pleased to have her superiority officially confirmed. I stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably 30 seconds processing what had just been said out loud. The truth I had always known but had somehow hoped was not really true. The confirmation that my entire childhood, my whole relationship with my parents, had been based on a fundamental rejection of who I was. But instead of crying or arguing or begging them to take it back, something different happened. I felt calm, crystal clear, like a fog had lifted and I could finally see everything exactly as it was. "Thank you for finally being honest," I said quietly. "I appreciate knowing where I stand." I walked into the kitchen, got James, and told him we were leaving immediately. He looked confused until he saw my face, and then he started gathering our coats without questions. We packed our overnight bags in silence, while my parents sat in the living room, not even trying to stop us or apologize. The 6-hour drive home was the most peaceful I had felt in years. Not sad, not angry, just free. Like I had been carrying a weight my entire life and had finally set it down. The next morning, I started making changes. I called my cell phone company and changed my number. I went through every social media platform and blocked my parents and Madison. I wrote one final email explaining that I was done trying to earn love from people who had made it clear they would never offer it and that I would not be in contact with them going forward. James supported every decision completely. "You have been trying to get their approval for 30 years, he said. "How long are you supposed to keep trying?" I gave away the gifts they had sent over the years, donated the family photos, and removed every trace of them from our home. It felt like cleaning house in the most literal sense, making space for the life I wanted to build with people who actually valued me. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then the panic started. Sarah, my closest friend from college, called to tell me that my mom had contacted her on Facebook, desperate to get my new phone number. She said there had been a misunderstanding, Sarah told me. She seemed really upset. Then my old neighbors called James to say that my parents had shown up at our old apartment building, asking the landlord for our forwarding address. When they were told that information could not be shared, Mom had broken down crying in the parking lot. Madison apparently called my workplace, claiming there was a family emergency and trying to get someone to give her my contact information. When that failed, Dad called James's office begging to be put in touch with us. The more desperate they became, the more certain I felt about my decision. Where had this urgency been for the past 3 decades? Why did cutting them off completely suddenly make me important enough to chase James's mother called one evening to tell me that my mom had somehow found her number and spent 20 minutes crying on the phone, begging her to convince me to call home? She kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, James's mom told me. But honey, misunderstandings do not last 30 years. The turning point came when they showed up at James's parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, hoping we might be there for dinner. We were not, but James's dad called immediately to tell us about the visit. Your parents seemed genuinely shocked that you would cut contact, he said, like they could not understand how their words had affected you. Your mom kept saying that families are supposed to forgive each other, that Madison misses you. I almost laughed at that last part. Madison missed me the way someone might miss a piece of furniture they had grown accustomed to seeing in the corner. 6 months passed before the intensity of their efforts died down. 6 months of blocked calls, undelivered letters, and secondhand messages through anyone they could think of who might have contact with us. 6 months of them experiencing for the first time the consequences of 30 years of emotional neglect. During this time, something beautiful happened. Without the constant drain of trying to earn my parents' approval, I had energy for the relationships that actually mattered. James and I grew closer. I deepened friendships with colleagues who appreciated my work and personality. I started therapy to process the years of feeling inadequate and began to understand how much of my self-worth had been tied to their impossible standards. When I got pregnant again, 8 months after cutting contact, I felt pure joy without the complicated overlay of wondering how my parents would react. When our daughter was born healthy and beautiful, I experienced the celebration and support from James's family and our chosen friends without the absence of my parents overshadowing the moment. Our daughter will never know her maternal grandparents, but she will grow up knowing she is treasured and celebrated by everyone in her life. She will never have to wonder why some family members matter more than others, because we will surround her only with people who understand that love should not be rationed or withheld based on arbitrary preferences. The hardest part was not missing my parents, because I had been mourning their love my entire life already. The hardest part was letting go of the fantasy that someday they would change, that someday I would be enough. Accepting that some relationships are fundamentally broken, not because of anything you did or failed to do, but because some people are simply incapable of fair love. I learned that family is not just about blood relations or legal obligations. Family is about people who show up consistently, who celebrate your victories and support you through challenges, who make you feel valued and appreciated for who you are. By that definition, James and his family became my real family years before I made the official break with my birth family. Sometimes I wonder if Madison ever thinks about the role she played in our family dynamic, whether she recognizes how the favoritism affected both of us in different ways. But mostly, I do not think about any of them anymore. They have become characters in a story about my past rather than active participants in my present. The woman who spent 30 years trying to earn love from people who had decided she was not worthy has been replaced by someone who knows her value and refuses to accept less than she deserves. That transformation would never have been possible while I was still hoping for their approval. 3 years later, I can say with complete honesty that cutting contact with my parents was the healthiest decision I ever made. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop accepting hurt from them. What do you think? Was I right to cut ties with my family, or should blood always come first, no matter how toxic the relationship? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I know this topic hits close to home for many people. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your worth and setting boundaries that protect your peace. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who refuse to see your value. Until next time, choose relationships that choose you back.